Hello, I'm Bob Durfee. I'm the Director of Construction Services at EnviroMed Design Group. I'm a registered civil engineer in Minnesota and a licensed builder. I've been in the building business for over 40 years. I remodeled my first dental office in 1969, and since I've been involved in over 80 offices around the country, either as a construction manager or as a contractor. I've worked as a laborer, I worked as a carpenter, I had a small home building business. I was a general contractor for a while. We employed directly over 50 people. I've worked as a boat builder. I've been a cook on a charter sailboat operation in Lake Superior. I've been in real estate development, and here's something I want you to write down about real estate development if you're thinking about being a developer. There are two things that happen. A person with money meets a person with experience. They do a development deal, and at the end of the deal, and this is important if you're thinking about being a developer, the person with the experience ends up with the money, and the person that had the money ends up with the experience. So just put that in context if you're thinking about being a developer. I've made money in development, I've lost money in development. We developed the first factory outlet center west of the Mississippi River in Minneapolis. And we had a cable car built for us in Oregon, a San Francisco cable car that we drove back to use, just to promote the project and promote tourism and things like that. And that was quite a journey. During my presentation, I hope my comments will make your journey in your building process a little easier. In this section, I'll talk about the benefit of quality plans, some of the initial steps you need to take before you start planning. People make a mistake. They think the first thing I'm going to do is go out and do my floor plan. Well, there are a lot of things that have to happen before. I will give you a partial checklist of items that you can use when you're either looking at a piece of land to buy or you're looking at a lease space. And then I'll talk about kind of the timeline, how long is it going to take to plan it, how long to do the permitting and things like that. So with that in mind, let's get rolling. So where do we begin? What do we do? How long is all this going to take? Lou and Jackie talked about being really clear with why you were going into your new office and why you were doing it. The why is so that you're really focused. Are you doing it because there's somebody doing the block that's giving you competition? Are you simply tired of being in one of these old offices? Are you adding an associate? These all kind of drive what your vision should be. When I'm on a sailboat, I'm standing in the cockpit, I can see about 7 miles. And when I get up on the bow of the boat, I can see another 3 miles out, like probably 10 miles. So what I like to tell people is, in your vision, do some horizoning. See how far you can look out to the horizon during this process. Don't do your project for what you are doing right now in your practice. Think about what you might be doing 5 years out. And as you go through this, you want to follow a logical sequence. You've all heard ready, aim, fire. Make sure you don't do fire, aim, ready. That will cause you all kinds of problems down the line. And that's where people say, okay, I've got my land, I've got my lease space, now I'm going to start my floor plan. Well, there's too much to do before then. As you move through this, you need to figure out how much you're going to do yourself. A person that has got some experience will probably take twice as long as somebody that does it professionally. If you've built a house recently, you may know something about construction. You're probably a 2 times person. If you're 3 times, it'll take you 3 times as long if you've got less experience. And if you're one of these alpha males, alpha females that think you can do everything without any experience, it's going to take you 4 times as long. You're going to muddy the water, you're going to create some stress for yourself, and there are going to be a lot of give-ups on there. You're going to give up your free time, because things you deal with, you work during the day kind of 8 to 5. That's also when the city officials you need to contact, the planners, and everybody else works. So if you're going to try and do some of this investigation on your own, you're going to have to give up some of your production time. And if you figure your production is on $10,000 per month without your hygiene, that will cost you about $50 an hour. So if you're producing $75,000 a month, that's going to cost you almost $400 an hour to give up time at the chair to go out and do some of these things. So by delegating what you do, you hire the team, and you pay the bills, and you practice dentistry, and off you go. Okay, when you hire someone to do the professional plans for you, what you're going to get the layout you want. People that understand dental offices will have a lot of ideas, things that you haven't even thought about. When you have plans that are complete, you're going to get more accurate pricing because everything is going to be shown on there. The builder looks at it and says, I know exactly what's going to be included in here. And that will result in fewer change orders or surprises as you go along. It'll shorten the construction time, which in turn will lower your construction loan costs. An example of the savings in construction loan cost, $100,000 in today's rates will cost you about $800 a month. So if you're, say, $600,000 into your project and you get a month delay in the project, it's about a $5,000 bill. So if your plans are good and everybody understands what they're doing, you have no delays. That gives you earlier occupancy, which finally gives you more time to practice dentistry. And with the earlier occupancy, you're getting into this higher production area sooner, which is just going to make more money for you as you go along. So where do we start? Lou and Jackie talked about having a budget. You really know what this is going to cost. You have to have an idea of what you're going to take to the bank. And you have to be comfortable with the debt service that you're going to take on. So you need to get the help in the beginning to establish your budget. And in doing that, you're going to explore your financing options. And this can be your local bank. Your local bank may end up partnering with the SBA and doing something like that. One thing you need to be careful with, depending on the market area you're in, when you're talking to your banker, you can know your banker very well, and you'll find out that the banker will say, sure, we can take care of your project. You've got $1 million that you want to borrow. And what you don't know playing in the background is your bank that says, yes, we can help you, may have a lending limit of $500,000. That means that your bank will have to go out and find another bank for you to partner with so that you can get the loan. And in a tough financing market, your bank may have trouble finding a participating bank. So a fair question if you're talking to your local bank is, what is your lending limit? Will you have to get a partner in this loan for me? And after you've gone through all of this and you find out that, gee, it's going to take a little bit more money down, it's more than I thought, you may have to engage a practice management consultant. You may have to work on increasing your collections. You may have to work a little bit longer. And you may end up delaying the practice or the project just until you can get some things taken care of and increase your cash flow. When you're going through it, you want to involve your office team and your advisors, meaning your CPA and dental equipment person could be an advisor. But your CPA will say, yeah, you can afford this or you can't, or this is what it's going to take for you to cover this kind of debt. Your office team, depending on the type of dentist you are, if you're really involved in the practice and you're involved in everything that happens in the office, you'll have a pretty good idea of what people need to function. If all you do is come in, work chairside, and let your team, if you will, take care of all of the other office functions, there are a lot of things that go on in the office that you're not aware of. So it's good to sit down, have team meetings, and say, this is what I'm thinking about doing. I really want to get some of your input. After you've done this, Lou and Jackie talked about getting an experienced design team. Because when you're looking for, whether it's a lease space or a new piece of property, you want to have somebody on your side that can answer questions, that you can say, I've got this piece of property, how do you think it will look, before you go out and buy it. The same thing with the lease space. I'll talk more about that later, things to look at. And at the same time, you want to get a builder or a construction manager that will negotiate the contract to do the work for you. This can also be a valuable resource to work with the budgeting, to work with your planning, to start arranging contractors and subcontractors, people to work on it. They can help you talk to your bank about budgeting. So getting your team together in the beginning is really important. You want to start dealing with your dental equipment. When I talked about the advisors earlier, your dental supplier could be one of those people. You want to find out what equipment you've got that you're not going to use, and then you want to get rid of it somehow, figure out where it's going to go. You don't want to take your old equipment, put it in your basement or your garage, get rid of it, get it gone. Your builder needs to know early on what kind of equipment you're going to be putting in. One of the things that will drive a builder crazy is not knowing what your dental equipment is going to be, because that reduces the quality of your plans. If you're going through with a whole bunch of new equipment and we have no idea what it is, we can't plan the electrical, we can't plan the electrical service, we can't get the plumbing in the right place, and if you choose your equipment later, we may have drywall on and then we're going to have to take drywall off to get some of the circuiting in, that kind of thing. So you want to get your dental equipment done early in the game. So after you've gone through this, and you've got some ideas together about where you want to be, you've got your goals, your visions, and everything taken care of, it's time to go out and look for some land, look for a lease space or a condo. We're still not ready for that floor plan. We've got a lot of work to do yet. So what we're going to do in the beginning, we're going to talk about Builder Bob's Book of Acts. The location and the size of a lot or the space you're looking at. If you're doing a new building, your land will be probably 7 or 8 times your floor plan. That's a good guideline. A lot of this can be driven by where the parking has to be. Some cities require that your parking be in the back of the building or at least on the side. You can't park in the front. A lot of that will be determined about the kind of site access you have. How do you get on? How do you get off with the entrance into the street? If you're in a lease or a condo space, you can figure about 500 square feet per operatory. And this will vary greatly depending on the size. If you're looking at a long, skinny place, if you're looking kind of at a strip mall or something like that, or an older building that's full of columns, you're going to have to add maybe 50 square feet per operatory. That's why having your architect involved early, somebody in dental office design experience early is good, because you can take a piece of property or a lease space and show that to them and say, how is this going to work? Can I get my office in here? The other thing on land, you can also add space if you're going to be doing sedation dentistry, if you want a pickup area where you want to drive up to the building, so you have maybe a portico over that to shelter people depending on the weather. And if you're when you're looking at a lease space, you also need to know the difference. 2 words, write these down if this is what you're thinking. Write down leasable space and usable space. And it's important you know the difference, because the usable space is what you're going to pay the rent on. It's what they're going to base the common area maintenance costs on, the CAM costs. And the usable space is going to be 85 or 90% of that. If somebody says, I've got 3,000 square feet of leasable space, and you figure, well, that's great. I'm going to do 6 ops, 500 square feet per op. They'll fit in there a piece of cake. And then you find out that the usable space in there, when they take out a corridor and they take out the elevator access, they take out a stairway possibly, and they take out some other things that goes into the common area of the space, you're down to maybe 2,600 square feet of usable space. Leasable, usable. Make sure you understand those. Next thing you want to do with this before you go any farther on your zoning, check it. It doesn't matter if it's an office building, a piece of property someplace, in a residential area, in a business area, check it. If you're doing a new building, you're going to need a site survey. This is going to locate your easements. It's going to talk about the setbacks. It's going to give you the topography when they do the survey on it. You can stand and look at a piece of property and say, gee, there isn't any slope to that. And you can find out that that piece of property is going to slope 5 or 6 feet and 100 feet, which might make your ADA access through the parking lot difficult, maybe impossible to achieve. And that will also delineate any wetlands there. If you do have wetlands in your property, you're going to open up a can of worms, possibly with the Corps of Engineers or with the local watershed management people. So you need to find out if these are there. You can look at this beautiful piece of property and say, gee, aren't those wonderful plants over there and everything else, and find out that that's delineating a wetland. And all of a sudden, you've lost a third of this piece of property, the usable area on it. Soil borings. If you're doing a new building, 2 more words, do them. They're cheap insurance. They'll cost you probably $3,000. You'll find out what's under the ground, if you have water table, what kind of bearing capacity you have. If you're in an area full of rock, you probably don't need it, but any place where there's soil, dirt if you want to call it that, do your borings, and here's a reason why. Here's somebody that said, gee, I don't think I need soil borings, but look, you know, this is 4 feet down, and there's water that had to be pumped throughout the entire project. Here's another one. You can see the soil here just kind of caving in. There's one excavator here. There's another one over here. There were 2 dump trucks hauling the stuff away. I mean, this is just mud in the bottom, and we're trying, the more they dug, the more this stuff just slid down into the hole. And it just went from that to worse. We ended up with only 1 excavator on the project because the other one had to follow the trucks and dig the stuff out of the back of the trucks because they wouldn't dump. Soil borings do them. The infrastructure, whether this is a new property or a lease space, you need to know where the sewer and water is. Is it across the street on a new piece of property? Is it down the hall on a remodel? How do you get the water in and out? Where's the water supply? In a lease space? Do you have to go to someplace central? Have they run a water line into the space? Again, is it across the highway? What do you have for gas and electric service? Sometimes the electricity, they'll say, yes, it's there. We have this lease space for you, and we've got this 100-amp panel, and you can use it. Well, what you may not know is that you're going to need a 400-amp panel. So that'll require bringing in a whole new service. You've signed a lease on this piece of property, and somehow you have to figure out how to get another 300 amps worth of service in. And that could be major if this is an established area and the parking is down, the landscaping is in, and everything else. Same thing with the telephone service. Make sure it's available. Internet access. You can have cable, you can have DSL, and people make the assumption that everybody has high-speed internet access. If not, you're going to end up with a T1 line, and a T1 line right now is running about $400 a month. So if you take a 15-year lease where you've added $400 a month to your expenses, you know, do the math on that, and you're probably $75,000 worth of expense that you've added over that 15-year lease just because you found a cheap piece of property that didn't have internet access and you had to get a T1 line in. If you're doing multi-story work and you're going to use med gas or you want a washer and dryer in the facility, you need to talk to the building owners and you need to talk to the fire marshal early about your med gas. Depending on where your med gas closet is, the location of the venting, sometimes it can come into the building and sometimes it has to go out of the building. A lot of this is up to the fire marshal's discretion, even though the National Fire Code says it doesn't have to. But when you're in the fire marshal's district, that person is the boss. If you're up on the 4th floor of a 7-story building, and you're putting your med gas closet in, you've signed the lease, again, you're all set to go, you submit your plans, and the fire marshal says, I'm sorry, you're going to have to vent that gas room to the outside. You're going to have to cut a couple of holes in the building and get it taken care of. And you say, well, how bad can that be? Until you go to the building owner and say, I have to cut a couple of holes in your building. And the building owner says, yeah, right, good luck. So these are things you have to check out before. Also, what are the work hours in a multi-story building? You may find out that you cannot start work until 5 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock at night, and you have to be done by 6 o'clock in the morning. Also, how do you get materials up and down into the space if you're above the first floor? Is there a freight elevator? Do you have to take a window out? All of these things impact your costs, and it's okay if you know it in the beginning, because then you can plan for it. If you don't plan for it in the beginning, then all of these things come through as a surprise, either as a change order from the builder, because the builder doesn't, they're not going to check it out. They're just going to go ahead and say, sure, we can do that. And then all of a sudden, you've got a change order. New building, water management right now is one of the biggies on site development. There are two ways that you go with it. You can either have detention, where you slow the water down. You can let it run off-site, but you can't let any more run off at a greater rate than it was before you put your building up. So when you add your roof, you add your parking lot, you're going to add an increased flow of water off the site. So that may require that you build a detention basin and then have a smaller pipe going out into the city storm sewer or out into the street, wherever it's going to flow. And areas right now are starting to look at detention, realizing whatever you do on your site and the water runs off, you need to manage the total suspended solids in the water that's leaving the site. And you say, well, I'll just do a grass pond. And what that does, that takes care of about 75% of it. A lot of the areas are saying we need 80% or better of suspended solid removal. So you need to be sure on this. It could add a lot of landscaping costs to this detention basin. The other thing you have going, if they say you have to retain it, keep it on the site, you need to make sure that you've got a place on your site big enough where you can hold the water, you can get the water to it. This goes back to the slope of your site. If you're building back kind of onto a hillside where your site slopes from front to back, you're going to end up with a pond in the front of your building. So you need to know these things, and these are all the things you have to look at before you get too far down the road. The impervious cover limits, you may find I've got this beautiful site. It's kind of small, but I think it'll fit. And you go ahead and buy it, and you find out your impervious cover limits, which means your parking and your roof surface, your sidewalks, everything that puts a hard cover on the surface of the land is over the allowable limit according to the zoning ordinances. Parking requirements, Lou talked about these a little bit. You need to check the local requirements. Start there, because most of the time they're going to be minimum for what you need. Typically on an office building, you need 5 spaces for every 1,000 square feet. So if you have a 2,500 square foot office, that translates into about 13 spaces. We like to recommend that you have 1 for each staff, 1.5 per each operatory, an additional 1 for a visitor, a delivery or something, and as Lou said, you're always going to need 1 minimum handicap stall. So that turns into about 15 spaces. So if you go with the city minimum of 13, you could be 2 spaces short. You have a staff of 5, and you've got 8 in the chairs and the other 2 spaces. If you're doing an orthodontic practice, we recommend using 2 spaces per chair. Landscape requirements. Okay, what's happening? You say, no big deal, I'm just going to go in and plant some trees. A lot of cities have ordinances about what they require, and they can require screening along the main street, along the sidewalk. They may require a berm so that the front part of a car is covered, and they may have a tree ordinance. Every 10 feet across the front, we're going to require a mature tree to be installed. You may have to fence the side yard if you have residential on either side of you. A lot of times they want to protect that. And sometimes you want to protect yourself from what's on the other side of the property too. So check these out. Signage, that's simple. Just check the ordinances, check the zoning ordinances, and find out what they do require. So after you've done all that, and if everything is okay, everything fits, and it's all going to work, the land is big enough, the site is okay, you can get all of your infrastructure items taken care of, then it's time to get into the design process. And the first part we call the schematic design, and this can take a month or two. This is where you do your code review, you check on the ADA requirements, you incorporate the infrastructure, you figure out where your sewer and water is coming from, and you develop your floor plan. And this is going to be kind of a rough floor plan that you can look at and think about and noodle around a little bit. And you're going to review your budget. As you develop your floor plan, you may find out that, I need a little more space than I thought. So people told me it was going to be so many dollars a foot, and I based my budget on that. So review your budget kind of at each step as you go. Schematic design. The second phase, you're going to develop this design, and that's going to take 2 or 3 months, depending on the size of the project and how fast you react. What you're going to be doing here is creating the third dimension. You're going to take your floor plan, you're going to finalize it, and then you're going to raise it up. You're going to start showing cabinetry, you're going to start showing the window locations, you're going to start dealing with the ceiling treatment, you're going to complete the interior design. And Stephanie will talk more about the interior design later. At that point, you'll be approving all the finishes that were selected, your carpeting, your wall covering, and things like that, so the plans can be completed and you can get your documents ready for construction. Again, update the budget, because you're looking at, gee, that really is nice, or I never thought about putting tile in that area, and I like the things you've done to the ceiling. I didn't consider that when I had my previous budget. Now that we've looked up in the third dimension, this is what we have. So update the budget. You've got that done. It's time for the construction documents, and these can take a month and a half to 2 months to complete. If you're doing a new building, you have to complete the site plan, you have to complete the landscape plan, you have to complete the mechanical, electrical, and the plumbing plans for the permit. And then you have to bundle all this together and submit those to the building department for the permit. So what do? You update the budget again. Because when you went through the landscape plan, the landscaper came back and said, it'd really be nice if you put a little pond over here or something. And you said, yeah, good idea. So update the budget, keep track of it. Don't say the budget is going to be fine as you move along. This has to be a moving target for you. Next phase you get into is the pricing. This can take a month or two. If you picked your contractor earlier and the contractor is working along with the architect as you go, a lot of this pricing is being handled. They're talking to subcontractors. They've got people lined up to bid on it. And when the plans go out, people are ready. He's also checked out that the subs have the time to work on the project. If they get the job, they're ready to start. They're not just going to take the low bid and say, well, gee, I've got a lot of work. I can't get to it for a while. So all of these things happen in the pricing. The bids come in. You look at the bids and you say, cost a little bit more. I guess I can change my budget and see how that goes. I may have to go back and redo some things because it's over budget, and I can't take it to the bank being this far over the budget. If you've been working with a builder that's helping you with the budget, chances of that happening are probably less than if you simply say, gee, I'm going to go out and get some prices now. You want to establish some contingencies, because no matter what happens on a project, whether you are making changes or the unforeseen things come up to the contractor. I mean, this happens. It's part of construction. You have to have a little bit of money tucked away someplace just to cover these, whether it's a line of credit or something in a shoebox. And when you get these prices, you're going to submit those to your lender, and then you get into the permit and financing stage, 1 or 2 months. I like to call this the jerk around period, because this is where all the wheels can come off the deal. You're sitting there, you're waiting for the permit to be approved, you're waiting for the plans to come back. The plans come back and there's a 2-page work letter from the building department saying you need to make all of these changes to comply. So you make those changes, then you resubmit for the final approval and say, I wish I would have had somebody check some of these things before I got this far. If you have a good design team, they'll take care of those things. That'll shorten that timeline. While that's happening, you're waiting for the appraisal, and you're waiting for the lender approval, and you may end up looking for more money, because the appraisal is going to come back, and it's going to be less than the bank is willing to lend, because the bank will lend typically a percent of the lower of the appraised value or the actual construction costs. So you may have to go out and look for more money, and that could be one of the uses for that contingency that I talked to a minute ago. Then you sit around and you survive all this. So how long does all this take? The construction, a new building is kind of 5 or 7 months. If you're building in the North Country where you have snow, or the southern part of the country where you have hurricanes, you've got a month in there for weather. Lease space or condo, a fairly simple project, can go 3 months. It may go up to 6, depending on, again, the work hours. Can you work during the day, or do you have to work at night? After you've gotten the construction going, what do? Think about a groundbreaking. Talk about a party for the trades afterwards to thank them for all the good work they're doing. This is kind of a nice thing to do as you're going along. Bring donuts to the job site in the morning. Once a week, maybe Tuesday is donut morning or something. People start looking forward to that. You say thank you. It gives you a chance to be on the site and build a relationship. You can take your plans and put them in your old office for the patients to see and say, this is what we're going to do. This is where you are going to be coming for treatment. You maybe want to pass out maps to the new location for somebody that may not be back for 6 months. Say, this is where the new building is going to be. You start going through your old office. Just get rid of the junk. Things that you haven't used for a while. Put it in a pile, get a dumpster, get rid of it all. And if you've done it properly, you're going to enjoy the process. If you want to shorten the timeline, things I've talked about, make your decisions promptly. If a builder or the architect ask a question, give them the answer. Work in your financing early, hire your design professionals early, hire your builder early, and get your equipment taken care of early. That will really help everyone. And remember, things are not always as they appear, so keep your eyes open, pay attention, do your homework, enjoy the process, stay tuned. We have a lot more things to talk to you about. I'll be back later to talk to you about hiring the team, questions to ask, things like that.